The Darkness was released on June 25th, 2007 on all major consoles at the time, which was the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. The game was developed by Starbreeze Studios and published by 2K Games and Top Cow Productions. The Darkness was based on the comic book series The Darkness. Now, I've never read the comic books and I never really got into comic books, but I know this was a pretty popular comic as it got a video game interpretation. The Darkness was a first-person shooter, and it added something new to the first-person genre. Now, the gameplay doesn't exactly hold up today, as it's a bit dated, and the graphics are not too terrible. It is backwards compatible on the Xbox Series X, which I captured all my gameplay here on the Xbox Series X with an Xbox 360 disc. And the first game plays, it's a little rough around the edges as far as gameplay goes, but it's not terrible. I actually just played through the entire game a couple months ago, and I decided I wanted to make a video on it because Uncle Vex, good friend of mine, recommended doing this because we are big fans of this game, and for good reason. If you missed this game, this was a fantastic game. From the amazing storyline to the very talented and well-scripted voice acting, this was, in my book, at the time for the Xbox 360 game, this was a 10 out of 10. The multiplayer was pretty fun, although there was some, if you were an achievement person, there was some tough achievements, specifically the Dawn achievement, which was win, I believe, 250 or 500 multiplayer games, and you needed 6 people in a lobby, if I recall, for any of the achievements that count towards progress. So this was a tough game for an achievement hunter to complete their achievement list for this game. Now, as far as the story goes, this was an original story, I do believe, and it was so intriguing and interesting. It was such a fun story. Like, this checks all my boxes. I love sci-fi horror, and I love gritty New York City or LA, and this takes place in the city. He's in the mob, I guess would be the best description, and he's in a crime family, and his Uncle Paulie's the leader of the family. Our character's name is Jackie Estacado. Now, there's something deep down in Jackie, and it's been in their family for years, and it's called the Darkness. We touch on that later in the game as they explain it further and tell you kind of how it got there. But basically, it's called the Darkness, and it's just like an essence, and that's where he gets the demon arms that come out, and they have to devour hearts. And part of the gameplay is you have to stay in the shadows, because that's why they call it the Darkness, and the light hurts the darkness. Playing through the game, it's a first-person shooter. You have multiple different guns and shotguns and stuff like that. But then the stuff that the Darkness does, and then you have Darklings, which are like the little guys that run around and help you out. And you have like a kamikaze one, a gunner, one that can open doors and stuff for you. So they help you along the way, and it makes the gameplay interesting and just adds to the game, in my opinion. But as far as the story goes, I don't want to spoil it I mean, it's a very old game, but I don't want to spoil it too much, because I highly recommend everyone go try this game out, go play it, give it a try, because it's not a long game. You can beat it in 6-7 hours. It's just a fun game. Now, it's slightly open world as well. After you complete a mission, you have a chance to walk around the subways of New York, and you take the trains to different areas, and there is side missions, so it's not completely linear. And although there is some times where you're scratching your head but you don't know where to go, it's not too terrible to comprehend and understand. There's a handful of side quests to further the story and get some more backstory on characters and stuff like that. And then obviously there's some achievements tied to your side quests. But overall, the game is great. So back to what I was saying about the story without spoiling. So basically, your Uncle Paulie, he's kind of a piece of shit, and you're tired of it. He puts a hit out on you on your birthday, and as you were about to get killed, the darkness comes alive in you and it basically heals you, and then you go on a rampage after Uncle Paulie, and that's basically how the game plays out. So it's you versus your Uncle Paulie. He's sending all his guys. He's got the police chief in his back pocket, so we got all the crooked cops and all the thugs and 2-bit gangsters. They're all after you. So it's you against the world almost. You got a handful of your buddies, your Aunt Sarah, they're all on your side, and then there's the love of your life, Jenny, and it's a great story. There's some, I wouldn't say time travel, but you go back to a very long time ago, to the beginning of the darkness, and you kind of get like an origin of where that came from and how it runs in your family. And overall, it's a great game. The story, I would still say, is a 10 out of 10. I absolutely love this game. I've played this game 5 or 6 times by now, and I can't wait to play it again because I was capturing this footage and I was like, this game is just, it's so fantastic. I want a remaster of this game so bad because the controls are a little hard to get used to. They're not terrible, but they're a little tough. However, the graphics still look pretty good. If you're playing on a Series X on a nice TV, it doesn't look terrible. So that you got that going for you, and it's pretty cheap. I mean, you're probably better off going to pick up the disc somewhere on eBay or at a local game shop or something that has 360 games still, because it's not very expensive, but I think it's a little bit more to get it digitally. So I like to support the physical media aspect, but it's a great game. You should really give it a shot. It was received very well. It got high scores, 7s and 8s and 9s across the board when it was reviewed when it came out, and they don't make games like this anymore. It's not a AAA game. It's something that would fall in the AA space, but we don't get AA games like this anymore. And this is almost a hidden gem in my opinion. I feel like not too many people know about this game, and I just want to get people to know about this game because it's a great one, and we need more games like this, and we really need a remaster of this game or a Darkness Part 3, which leads me to The Darkness Part 2. So The Darkness was such a hit that it received a sequel. 5 years later, we got The Darkness 2, released on February 7th, 2012. Now, this was developed by Digital Extremes, still published by 2K, and it still had some good voice acting. Mike Patton came back to voice the Darkness, and that's really the most important part. I don't know if it was because it was a different developer, but it definitely took a different direction, which it's not terrible. It's still a good game. It still furthers the story, and the story went in an interesting direction. We'll get to that later, but I think that I prefer the graphic style of the first one more. They went more with a cartoony look to this game, which isn't terrible. It's like a cel-shaded. It's kind of sort of like Borderlands, but after going from the first one to this, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely different. I don't know if I would say it hurt the game, but to me it was a bit of, at the time, I remember it being a bit of a disappointment that they changed the graphic style, because the graphics weren't bad in the first one, and they still don't look too bad today, because this game is also backwards compatible on the Xbox Series X. And that's where I played it, and that's where I captured this footage. Continuing the story of the first one, so we got past the graphics looking a little bit different, and they start to grow on you. Again, it works for the game, I guess. It's not the worst thing in the world, but the voice actor for The Darkness stayed. The voice actor for Jackie Estacado, Brian Bloom, replaced Kirk, I'm gonna butcher this, but Acevedo. I'm sorry, but I butchered that name. Again, the voice acting in the first game was incredible. It really put you in the front row for what the game was. You know, they had their mob accent, the tough New York gangster city slicker. They had that voice perfect, and everyone nailed it. You know, they had that accent, they had just the demeanor and the lingo. They nailed it. I mean, I guess it sort of carried over here, but again, I just feel like this game doesn't really hold a candle to the first one. And it's unfortunate because the first one was such a good game, and I'm not saying this is a bad game by any means, but the first one was, I looked at it as like a masterpiece for a AA game. And now this game is just subpar, we'll go with. But so it continues the story, and it went in a very interesting direction. So they're trying to say this is in his head, and like the dark, you still don't really know if the darkness was in his head or if it was real until the end of the game, which I don't want to spoil it for you. So it was a good game. I played through it, and it added some RPG elements. You know, you had a stat tree, and you could upgrade and unlock different abilities and stuff like that. But it just, I don't know what it was. It just didn't suck me in like the first one. I wouldn't say it was a chore to play through, but I just definitely enjoyed the first one more. And the plot for this one just didn't really stick to me like the first one did. And it's just a shame, because the first one, I could play that game once or twice a year, and this one I would probably skip. You know, I would come back to it maybe every 2 years or something or so. Because again, it's not terrible, but it's not the first one. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was because of a different developer. I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, I still think the Darkness 1 is better than the Darkness 2. Now, this game was received pretty well, again, because again, it's not a bad game. It's not terrible. But it's, in my opinion, I prefer the first one. I still like this game, but I still just prefer the first one. I'm not sure why, but it was received well. It got slightly lower score than the first one, which I agree with. And the achievement list, since I touched on achievements on the first one, the achievement list on this game was a bit tougher, I guess. It was actually a co-op mode in this game, which I didn't really know about until recently. I must have missed it at the time, but I just checked it out the other day, and it's actually pretty cool. It's called Vendettas, and you can play co-op campaign with up to 4 players, which is awesome. And you can cooperatively play as these hitmen, and so you're basically like a Jackie Estacado, but they just put a couple new characters, you know, different skins, and they have different abilities and stuff like that. And you go and complete hit lists and just quick little missions, but it's pretty cool to do with a friend. But I checked this game out on the Xbox 360. It's also available on the PlayStation 3, and it's actually on Windows. It's on Steam. It's like $30 on Steam, which is definitely way too much for this game. If you're gonna play it on Steam, wait for it to get it under $10. Or pick up the Xbox 360 version, throw it into Series X. Or if you need to play it on PlayStation, it looks like you're only playing it on a PS3 because Sony refuses to make PS3 discs work in anything else besides a PlayStation 3, but that's a story for another video. Overall, The Darkness as a series is an amazing game. It's an amazing story, and I highly recommend you check it out because they're great games. Don't sleep on these games. They're so much fun. This was the height of AAA, not even AAA, I'm sorry. This is the height of AA gaming. We don't get AA games anymore. Everything's big AAA extravaganza games or these little indie games. There's nothing in between anymore. And it's a shame because we need these 6 to 10 hour games that we can beat and feel accomplished. I don't need a 60-hour God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn and stuff like that anymore. It's nice to play some bite-sized games and feel accomplished after you finish something. And most of the time, they wouldn't be a full-price game either. But I would love a remaster of The Darkness 1 and 2 and polish it up, maybe modernize the graphics, and then get ready for a Darkness 3, because I think this game needs a third in the series, and I would be first in line to pick that up because these are fantastic games. And I highly recommend you play these games. So that's my bit of a retrospective review on the game. I think the gameplay gets better with the Darkness Part 2. The first one is still a little rough around the edges to play. As you can see in some of my earlier gameplay, it's hard to get the crosshair where you want it and move around. There's no sprint. So if played today, there would be some quality of life issues. It definitely shows its age. Stuff that we expect in games today just weren't even a thought at the time when these games were developed, but that's fine because this game is pretty old, so we'll give it a pass. I highly recommend you check it out. And have you played this game before? Did I miss anything? Let's talk anything Darkness down in the comments. Have you guys read the comics? Because that's something I haven't done. How accurate are these games to the comics? I would love to know that. I would love to talk anything The Darkness down in the comments. So if you made it this far, I want to say thanks for sticking around. And if you like this video, why don't you give it a like, because that's the best thing you can do to help us out, and consider subscribing. But until next time, have a great day, guys.